The night sky above the ruined colony was black and cold, broken by the faint glow of burning cities far away. Smoke drifted across the shattered fields, carrying the smell of ash and metal. Silence ruled what was once a living place. No voices, no movement, only the slow crackle of dying fires. The warlord's fleet had come and gone, leaving nothing but broken walls and broken lives. Amid the rubble, the wind whispered through hollow streets, carrying faint echoes of screams that had long since stopped. The Terran relief fleet arrived late, their ships sliding down from orbit like ghosts too late to save anyone. Search drones hovered over the wreckage, scanning for any signs of life, while ground teams moved through streets filled with debris. Most of them expected nothing but bodies. But deep under the collapsed structure of an old transport station, a faint beeping started on one of the scanners. A life sign. Weak. Barely there. Corpsman Elias Ward, a Terran combat medic, pushed through the rubble with 2 Marines behind him. Their lights cut through the dust as they found a narrow space between fallen beams and concrete. Inside lay a small figure, wrapped in torn fabric, her skin a pale silver blue that reflected the beams like cold glass. Her chest rose weakly, a shallow breath at a time. She was young, too young to be in this war. One of the Marines muttered that she would not survive the night. Her kind rarely did after such wounds. Alien laws and genetics made it hard to save them. They rejected most medicines, and their healing was slow even at the best of times. But Elias knelt beside her and checked her pulse. It was faint, fading like the smoke around them. He saw the fear in her eyes even though she could not speak. The medic hesitated. His orders were clear. Stabilize survivors if possible, but do not use restricted Terran nanotech on alien bodies. The Council had banned it. Too many unknowns, too many risks. But if he followed the rules, she would die in minutes. He opened his field kit, fingers brushing the silver vial of Terran gene repair nanites. They were designed to rebuild soldiers on the brink of death, rewriting cells, forcing life where none should remain. Using them on her was illegal. But leaving her here, alone in the dark, was worse. He injected the nanites into her veins, whispering, "Hold on, kid. Don't quit on me now." The Marines exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. They had seen too many die already. The girl's body jerked as the swarm entered her system, tiny machines spreading like sparks in the bloodstream. Her breathing quickened. Monitors flickered with unstable readings, spikes, drops, then sudden rises again. Her heart, once fading, pounded back to life with a strength that made the medic pause. Something was happening inside her cells, something no Terran manual had ever predicted. Outside, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from distant engines. Enemy patrol craft were returning to sweep the ruins, searching for survivors or witnesses. Elias and the team lifted the girl onto a stretcher and moved through the ruins, keeping low between walls and shadows. Every corner felt like a trap, every sound a warning. The girl's eyes flickered open once, just enough to meet his. There was no anger there, only a strange, deep sadness, as if she already knew she was not meant to survive this place. But her pulse was steadying, her skin regaining color. The nanites were working too well, almost unnaturally fast. They reached the evac zone as the first enemy drones scanned the horizon. Terran dropships hissed steam into the cold air as they prepared to leave. Inside the bay, medics rushed to triage the wounded, but when they saw the alien girl, they stepped back. One whispered, "She's one of them. Why waste the resources?" Elias ignored them. He hooked her to a monitor and set a quarantine tag. Her readings were strange now, mixed patterns, as if her body was rewriting itself under the nanite's influence. The commander's voice crackled over the radio. "Ward, report. Did you administer restricted tech?" The medic didn't answer at first. His eyes stayed on the girl as her chest rose with steadier breaths. He had broken the law, but for the first time that night, someone in this dead city might live. As the dropship lifted off, the ruins below disappeared into smoke and shadow once more. But deep inside the medical bay, a soft glow pulsed under the girl's skin, faint, like starlight trying to break through. No one else noticed it. Elias did. And in that silent moment, he wondered if he had just saved a life, or started something far more dangerous than the war outside. The medical bay hummed with a low steady sound as the dropship broke through the upper layers of the planet's sky, carrying the wounded and the dead away from the ruins below. Dim lights flickered over rows of stretchers, machines beeped quietly, and the air smelled of metal and antiseptic. The alien girl lay in the far corner, wrapped in a thin thermal sheet, her small chest rising and falling with each slow breath. Her skin, once pale as dying ash, now held a faint silver glow that pulsed under the surface like the heartbeat of a new star. Terran medics passed her stretcher but avoided looking too long, whispering to one another that she would not survive the journey. But Elias Ward, sitting on the metal bench beside her, knew better. He had seen the monitors. Her cells were rebuilding themselves faster than any standard recovery chart could explain. Hours passed in that floating silence. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled past as the ship climbed higher and higher, leaving behind the burning colony and the shadow of the warlord's wrath. Inside, the girl's eyelids flickered. Her breathing changed, deeper now, steadier, and then her fingers twitched. Elias leaned forward, his gloved hand brushing the side of the stretcher. "Easy," he said quietly, even though he wasn't sure she understood his words. Her kind rarely spoke Terran tongue, and in her state she might not hear him at all. But slowly, with a faint tremor, her eyes opened. They were wide, clear, and filled with confusion. She looked at the ceiling, then at the rows of human faces around her, then finally at him. The last thing she remembered was fire and ruin. Now she was among strangers, breathing air that smelled too clean to be real. A ripple of unease moved through the bay. A junior medic approached with a scanner, but when the readings flashed red with unknown patterns, he stepped back, frowning. "She's not stable," he murmured. "Something's wrong with her cells." Elias knew why. The Terran nanites were not made for her species. They were rewriting what they could not fully understand. They were forcing her to live when every natural law said she should have died. The commander arrived minutes later, his boots ringing on the deck. He looked at the girl as one might look at a dangerous device, then at Elias. "You administered restricted tech, didn't you?" His voice was low but sharp. Elias did not deny it. She was dying. There was no other way. The commander's eyes hardened. "You may have just created a problem bigger than the war we're already fighting." The girl tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through her side, and she fell back against the stretcher with a soft cry. Her voice was weak, her language a broken whisper, but Elias caught enough to understand. She wanted to know if her people had survived. He had no answer for her. Most had not. The Council's laws had forbidden interference in that sector until it was too late. Now she was alone, a relic of a colony erased by greed and guns. Her gaze wandered to her hands, her fingers curled, then uncurled, faster than before. Tiny scars along her arms were already closing, knitting together with unnatural speed. The medics stared. One of them whispered the word no one wanted to say aloud: biohazard. Orders came down within the hour. She was to be quarantined, moved to a sealed medical pod until the council decided what to do with her. Some spoke of containment. Others spoke of termination, to prevent contamination from spreading. No one asked her name. No one asked what she wanted. She was not a person to them now. She was a risk, an experiment that should not exist. Elias argued, his voice cold but steady. She's a child. She didn't choose this. We brought her aboard. Now we protect her. The commander only gave him a hard look and walked away, leaving soldiers to set up a guarded cordon around her stretcher. As the hours dragged on, the girl's strength returned in strange bursts. She sat up without help, her silver-blue hair falling into her eyes as she looked around the bay. Her movements were sharper now, her gaze more alert. She was afraid, yes, but there was something else in her stare, something almost human, a will to live that refused to bend. When a medic tried to restrain her wrist for another scan, her arm jerked away with a strength no one expected. The restraint strap snapped like paper. The bay fell silent. Elias stepped in before the guards reacted, raising a hand to calm them. "She's not dangerous," he said, though his own heart beat faster. He wasn't sure if that was true anymore. By the time the dropship docked with the Terran cruiser in orbit, the girl was awake fully, her breathing steady, her eyes following every movement around her. She said little, only a few broken words in her tongue, but she watched Elias with a strange focus, as if she understood he was the reason her heart still beat. The soldiers escorted her down the metal halls toward the quarantine wing, their rifles ready, their expressions tight. Somewhere deep in the ship, alarms murmured of new threats. Enemy scouts had been seen entering the sector again. But to Elias, the greater danger was already inside. The nanites were still at work, changing her in ways no one could predict. And in the dim light of that cold corridor, for just a moment, her shadow moved a heartbeat faster than her body, as if something beneath her skin was learning how to be alive. The Terran cruiser drifted in silent orbit, a dark blade against the stars, its decks alive with tension. Alarms had stopped hours ago, but the crew still moved as if the enemy might appear at any moment. Deep within its cold steel corridors, the alien girl sat inside a narrow quarantine chamber, its walls humming with a low containment field. She stared at the pale reflection of herself in the glass. Her silver-blue skin, once bruised and torn, was now whole again, smooth where wounds had been. But something was wrong. Her heartbeat felt too strong. Her fingers trembled with strange energy that did not belong to her old self. She pressed her palm against the glass and felt the faint warmth of power hum under her skin like a hidden storm. Elias Ward stood outside the chamber, arms folded, his face drawn in the cold light. He had been called reckless, a lawbreaker, a fool. He had been told that using Terran nanites on her might create something that could not be undone. But as he looked at her now, alive, awake, her eyes full of questions, he did not regret it. He only regretted that his superiors saw her as a problem instead of a person. Behind him, 2 armed soldiers stood watch, their rifles low but ready. "Command's order came through," one of them said without looking at him. "They're moving her to the research wing. Higher clearance. Higher containment." Elias felt a cold weight sink in his stomach. Research wing meant dissection, experiments, isolation without end. They would not treat her as a patient. They would treat her as a specimen. The girl looked at him, her thin fingers curled against the glass. She did not know the Terran language well, but she understood enough to feel fear. When the guards keyed the door, her heart raced. She took a step back, then another, her wide eyes flicking between their weapons and Elias's face. He wanted to say something, anything that would calm her, but the words caught in his throat. He knew what was about to happen. He knew he could not stand by and let it. The corridor lights dimmed for a moment as the ship shifted to combat standby. Enemy scouts had entered the outer perimeter, and every deck was tightening its defenses. That flicker of power was all he needed. "Now," he muttered under his breath, moving faster than the guards expected. A syringe hissed in his palm, standard marine sedative, quick and sharp. He jammed it into the neck of the nearest soldier, and the man went down like a stone. The second guard swung his rifle up, but Elias slammed his shoulder into the man's chest, ripping the weapon free before he could fire. The scuffle was silent, fast, over in seconds. The girl stared, frozen, as the door slid open under his stolen access card. "Come with me," Elias whispered, pulling the thermal cloak from the guard and wrapping it around her shoulders. She hesitated, then stepped forward, her bare feet cold against the steel floor. Her heart pounded in her chest as they slipped into the side corridors, moving past supply bays and quiet halls where only distant alarms hummed. Behind them, the ship carried on its war routines, unaware that 2 figures were vanishing into its maze. Every step felt louder than it should. The hum of engines was a constant pressure under their feet. The girl clutched the cloak tightly as they reached a sealed hangar near the lower decks. There, hidden behind rows of unused crates, rested a small combat dropship, one of the fast escape units meant for special operations. Elias keyed in his override codes, hands shaking slightly. The ship's hatch hissed open, cold air rushing out like a breath from the void. She climbed inside, glancing around at the dark cabin full of straps and empty seats. "Why?" she whispered, the word rough, broken, but clear enough. Elias looked back at her, his face hard with decision. Because they'll lock you away, he said. They'll call you dangerous, but you're just trying to live. He strapped himself in and brought the engines online, keeping the systems low to avoid triggering main control alerts. Outside the hangar, a security drone rolled past, its sensors sweeping the room, but the ship stayed cold and silent, hidden in the shadows. The moment came like a drumbeat, a shift in the patrol routes, a window too small to hesitate. Engines roared to life. The dropship slid out of the hangar, its cloak field blooming just as the outer doors opened. Alarms began to wail behind them. Over the comms, a cold voice snapped, unauthorized launch. Pursuit teams, scramble. Lights flared across the cruiser's flank as interceptor drones were released. The stars ahead were not empty. The warlord scouts were closer now, their thin black ships cutting across the dark like knives. Elias gritted his teeth and pushed the thrusters harder. The girl braced herself as the dropship dived through the gravity well, weaving between debris and ancient satellites. Lasers flared behind them, white lines slicing the void. One caught the tail edge of their cloak field, burning a scar across the hull, but the ship held. She felt the heat in her blood rise, a strange strength coursing through her limbs as the G-forces pressed them both into their seats. The cloak shimmered, then failed completely. They were exposed. Ahead, a blockade marker appeared on the sensors, a single unidentified vessel, its shape sharp and alien, blocking the only safe exit corridor out of the system. Its signal carried no flag, no code, only a silent pulse that made the girl's heart skip. Elias swore under his breath. "That's not ours," he muttered. "And it's not here by chance." The girl's hand curled on the armrest, her nails digging into the worn leather. The ship ahead powered its weapons, a cold light spreading along its hull like a rising sun. They had escaped one prison only to find another waiting in the dark. For a long moment, the stars seemed to hold their breath. The Terran cruiser behind them was launching pursuit. The unknown vessel ahead blocked their path. The girl felt something stir in her chest again, that same unnatural pulse, the nanites whispering through her veins. Elias glanced at her, then at the controls, his jaw tight. "Hold on," he said, his voice steady despite the storm building around them. "This isn't over. Not yet." The dropship floated in the shadow of a forgotten asteroid field, its engine silent, its hull scarred from the chase. Beyond the jagged rocks, stars burned faintly, cold and distant, while the black shape of the unidentified vessel drifted somewhere beyond their sensors. Elias Ward sat in the pilot's chair, eyes locked on the dim readings flashing across the console. The Terran cruiser was still searching the sector, but it had moved farther now, its patrols scattering in wide loops. For the moment, they were hidden. But he knew moments like this never lasted long. The alien girl sat across from him on a metal bench, wrapped in the same thermal cloak, her silver-blue hair falling in loose strands around her face. She had said little during the escape, her voice faint and raw, but now her eyes followed every motion of his hands. There was something sharper in them now, something that had not been there when he first found her in the rubble. It was not anger. It was something closer to awareness. She touched her side where the worst wounds had been, fingers tracing the smooth skin that had grown over shattered bone in just days. Her people could not heal like that. She knew it. He knew it. And that silence between them grew heavier with each passing second. Finally, Elias turned from the controls and walked toward the medical kit secured to the wall. He pulled out a scanner, its lights flickering pale blue as it hummed over her chest, arms, and skull. Numbers rolled across the small screen, rapid cell regeneration, enhanced nerve conduction, bone density rising beyond recorded norms. The readings were not just strange, they were impossible. "The nanites didn't just repair you," he said quietly. "They changed you." She tilted her head, trying to read his face. "Changed?" she repeated, her accent broken but clear enough to carry the weight of the word. Elias nodded, setting the scanner aside. "Human biotech was never meant for your species. It adapts, forces the body to live no matter what it takes. It copied some of our traits and rewrote parts of you. He paused, his voice low. You shouldn't even be alive, but now, you're something else. The girl's hands tightened in the cloak. Her people had been fragile for generations, always under the shadow of stronger empires, always the first to fall when war came. She remembered the warlord's ships blotting out the sky, the screams in the streets, the heat of collapsing walls. She had no family now, no home to return to, and now, hearing his words, she wondered if she even had a place among her own kind anymore. My people, she whispered, they will not accept this. Her eyes glimmered in the half-dark, a reflection of the stars beyond the viewport. They said we must stay pure. Not this. Elias leaned against the bulkhead, crossing his arms. Purity didn't save them, he said, not unkindly. Your colony burned while they argued over laws. The council watched and did nothing until it was too late. Now you're here. Alive. That means something. His voice hardened slightly as he glanced at the sensors again. The warlord isn't done. He's moving through this sector, and I don't think he's after me. Her gaze snapped to his, sudden and sharp. Me? She asked, though in her heart she already knew. She remembered the raiders dragging names through the dirt, searching for certain bloodlines, certain witnesses. She had escaped by accident, by hiding where no one looked. But now, with this new energy in her veins, she was more than just a survivor. She was a loose thread in the warlord's tapestry, and men like him never allowed loose threads to live. The console beeped softly, drawing Elias back. He activated the projection, a wide sweep of the sector, dots moving like slow sparks. The warlord's flagship had entered the outer rim, its escorts spreading like hunting dogs. Terran fleet chatter hinted they were not here for open war yet, but for something smaller, something that had slipped through their fingers. He looked back at her. They're coming. Not for the colony. For you. She gripped the edge of the bench, her knuckles pale, but there was no tear in her eye this time. Only a quiet, burning thought that grew in her chest. If they are coming for me, then I am no longer just running from them. She looked at Elias, the man who had saved her life against his own orders, the man now hunted because he refused to leave her behind. What will you do? She asked. He hesitated. There were orders to follow. There was a war to fight. But orders had failed her once, and the war had forgotten her. He moved to the navigation console and pulled up a map of the old mining belts on the edge of the system. We hide here, he said. There's an abandoned station, half collapsed. No one's used it in years. If they come, we make them fight for every inch. The girl nodded slowly, her fingers brushing the strange warmth under her skin. It was not pain anymore, it was something alive, something ready. I will fight, she said. The words came out strange in her mouth, but there was no fear in them. He studied her for a long moment, then opened a small compartment at his belt and pulled out a compact pulse pistol. It was too large for her hands, but she took it anyway, feeling the cold weight settle into her grip. The stars outside shifted as the dropship changed course, diving toward the far rim of the sector where broken rocks and abandoned tunnels waited like the ribs of a dead giant. As they approached the dark outline of the mining station, a low transmission crackled through the static, a voice, harsh and cold, speaking in the warlord's tongue. Return the girl, or the stars will burn again. The message repeated, over and over, echoing through the black. Elias turned it off, his jaw tight. The girl stared out the viewport, her reflection mingling with the stars, and for the first time since the rubble, her expression hardened into something new. Not just survival, but defiance. Somewhere inside her, the nanites stirred again. The mining station hung in the black like a dead fortress, its rusted beams stretching into the cold emptiness of space. Once it had been alive with engines, miners, and machines digging precious ore from the belt. Now it was a hollow shell, its halls echoing only with the low hum of failing lights and the hiss of air that leaked through ancient cracks. Elias Ward guided the dropship through the twisted entrance bay, engines on silent mode, his eyes flicking between dying sensors and the girl sitting beside him. Her face was calm, too calm for someone her age, but her fingers curled tight around the cold strap of the harness. She had not spoken much since the warlord's threat echoed across the stars. The message still lingered in the ship's memory like a shadow: return the girl, or the stars will burn again. Inside the station, dust floated like fine snow. The metal floor groaned under their boots as they stepped out, their lights cutting through decades of darkness. Elias led her through narrow corridors filled with the smell of rust and old oil, toward a central chamber that still held power. There, he set up a field generator, a few emergency lamps, and the remaining weapons from the dropship. One by one, the small group of Terran Marines he had convinced to stay joined them. They were not many: 5 soldiers, a medic, and a girl the galaxy now wanted in chains. But they had something more dangerous than numbers. They had chosen this place, and they were ready to bleed for it. The Marines worked quickly, welding old doors shut, placing mines in the access tunnels, rigging charges along the docking arm. Each sound echoed through the hollow station like a warning bell. The girl watched them, silent, her cloak pulled tight around her thin shoulders. She no longer flinched at the sound of weapons. She no longer trembled at the cold. Something in her was different now, stronger. When a piece of metal slipped and cut her palm, she stared at the wound, watched it close in seconds, and wiped the blood away without a word. Elias noticed. He had been watching her more than the scanners, more than the empty space outside. "You feel it, don't you?" he said quietly as they checked the generator together. She met his gaze but said nothing. The glow beneath her skin was faint now, but steady, like an ember that refused to die. He handed her a small pulse pistol, better fitted to her hand than the heavy weapon from before. "If they come, you aim for the joints. Armor means nothing if they can't move." Hours passed, each one colder than the last. Outside, the stars shifted as the warlord scouts closed in. Their dark ships spread across the belt like a net, slow and patient, cutting off every exit. The Terran cruiser had already withdrawn, unwilling to start a war over one medic's mistake. They were alone now, truly alone. The first attack came without sound, just a flicker on the sensors, then a shudder in the docking arm. Drones, black and sharp as knives, crawled through the gaps, their red eyes burning in the dark. The Marines opened fire, their rifles cracking bright blue across the steel hull. Sparks flew. The girl pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding, watching machines fall and shatter under human fire. But more came, crawling like insects, their limbs scraping metal, their weapons spitting silent lines of light. Elias dragged her behind a crate and fired 2 short bursts, cutting down the nearest drone. "Stay low," he shouted over the noise, though his voice was steady. The mines triggered, a chain of silent flashes tearing through the access tunnel. The shockwave rattled the whole station, dust falling from the ceiling like ash. For a moment, it was quiet again. Smoke filled the hall. Broken machines sparked on the floor. One Marine checked his shoulder, burned but still working. Another reloaded with shaking hands. The girl stared at the remains of the drones, their black shells cracking open to reveal cold circuits. She had never held a weapon in her life before this, but her fingers tightened around the pulse pistol now. "They will not stop," she said, her voice low but clear. Elias nodded. "No, they won't." The next wave was worse. Mercenaries this time, living men and women wrapped in gray armor, their helmets marked with the warlord's crest. They came through the opposite tunnel, their boots heavy, their rifles already spitting fire. The Marines fell back to the inner hall, every shot echoing like thunder in the metal ribs of the station. The girl stayed close to Elias, her breath fast, her heart racing with every flash of light. One mercenary broke through the smoke, swinging a blade of burning plasma. Instinct took over. She raised the pistol, fired once, twice. Blue light punched through the man's knee, and he fell with a scream that did not sound human at all. She had never fired at a living target before, but there was no time to feel what that meant. The fight dragged on until the halls were choked with heat and smoke. The Marines held, bruised but unbroken. Outside, the warlord's fleet shifted again, their main vessel moving into position like a dark moon. A voice cracked through the comm once more, louder this time, filled with cold promise. "You cannot hide her forever. She belongs to us." The girl stood in the flickering light, her cloak torn, her eyes wide but steady. The nanites in her blood whispered faster now, their glow visible along her neck like threads of silver fire. Elias saw it, and for the first time he did not try to hide his unease. She was no longer just the dying child from the rubble. She was becoming something else, something the warlord feared, and something the Terran command might also fear if they saw her now. The Marines reloaded in silence. Elias checked the generator. The girl looked at the dark corridor where the enemy had come from, then at the stars beyond the cracked viewport. "How many more?" she asked. "Enough to break us if we let them," Elias said. "But we're not letting them." The station groaned as the flagship locked its claws into the outer hull. The final battle had not yet started, but its shadow was already here. Somewhere deep in the structure, the nanites stirred again, faster, stronger, waiting for the moment when they would no longer just heal her, but make her fight like no one from her world ever had. The mining station floated in the cold void like a silent tomb, its metal beams stretched out into the endless dark. Once, it had been full of noise, machines digging into the asteroid belt, miners laughing over their hard-earned pay, engines roaring as cargo ships came and went. Now only the hum of old power cells and the whisper of escaping air filled the hollow structure. Elias Ward guided the dropship through the broken docking bay, engines whispering, eyes scanning dead consoles for any sign of movement. The girl sat beside him, her thin fingers gripping the straps tight. She did not look afraid anymore, but her silence was heavier than fear. Somewhere out in the belt, the warlord's ships were moving like wolves, waiting for the right moment to strike. Inside, dust floated like snow. Their boots made soft echoes as they stepped through the empty corridors. Rusted doors hung open, wires dangled like vines, and the cold bit through their armor. Elias led the small team, 5 Terran Marines, a medic with too much guilt in his eyes, and the girl the galaxy wanted either captured or dead. They moved quickly, setting up a field generator in the central hub, rigging the outer corridors with charges, welding the weaker bulkheads shut. It was not much, but it would slow the hunters. This would not be a fortress. It would be a trap that might buy them time. The girl watched them work, her cloak tight around her shoulders. She no longer flinched at the sound of tools or the hiss of welding torches. When a shard of metal cut her hand, she stared at it without a word, the wound closing in seconds, leaving a faint glow beneath her skin. Elias saw it. He had been watching her closely ever since the warlord's threat reached them. "Return her, or we will burn every station from here to Earth." He handed her a small pulse pistol, lighter than the one she had carried before. "Keep this," he said quietly. "Aim for the joints if you have to shoot. It's the only way to stop them from moving." She nodded once. Her fingers did not tremble. Hours passed. Outside, the belt shifted as the warlord scouts closed in, their ships cutting off every escape route. The Terran cruiser that had escorted them was already gone, its captain unwilling to risk open war over one medic's decision. They were alone now. The first strike came like a whisper, no warning, no alarms, just a flicker in the sensors and a sudden shudder in the docking arm. Drones crawled in, black and sharp like shards of glass, their red optics glowing in the dark. The Marines opened fire, rifles flashing blue arcs across the corridor. Sparks showered from torn steel. The girl crouched low behind a crate, the air shaking with silent explosions as mines went off in the outer tunnels. The floor trembled, the lights flickered, and the sound of tearing metal echoed like thunder. When the smoke cleared, broken machines lay scattered like dead insects. One Marine checked his armor, burned but intact. Another reloaded with shaking hands. The girl stared at the wreckage, then at her pistol. Her heartbeat was fast, her breath shallow, but her eyes were steady. "They will send more," she said quietly. "They always do," Elias replied. The second wave was worse. Mercenaries this time, flesh and blood wrapped in gray armor, helmets marked with the warlord's crest. They came in from the opposite tunnel, their rifles spitting light that burned through the station walls. The Marines fell back, their boots echoing against the cold floor as they fired controlled bursts into the smoke. One enemy broke through the haze, swinging a plasma blade that screamed with heat. The girl didn't think, She raised her pistol, fired twice. The shots tore through his knee, and he collapsed, his scream echoing in the hollow chamber. She had never shot a living person before. She felt no triumph, only the cold taste of survival. The hall filled with heat and smoke, every shot echoing like a heartbeat in the dark. Elias barked orders, his voice steady even as the walls shook. The Marines fought like men with nothing left to lose, every burst pushing the enemy a little further back. Outside, the warlord's flagship loomed closer, its claws locking into the station's hull. The message came again, louder now, a voice of iron and ice. You cannot keep her. She is ours. The girl stood in the flickering light, her cloak torn, the faint glow beneath her skin brighter now, threading across her neck like silver veins. The nanites inside her were awake, faster, stronger. Elias saw it, and for the first time, his jaw tightened. She was no longer just the dying child he had rescued. She was becoming something else. Something the warlord feared, and perhaps something Earth's high command would not understand. How many more will come? She asked. Enough to break us if we let them, Elias said. But we're not letting them. The old station groaned as another impact shook the outer hull. Sparks rained down. The Marines prepared their rifles. The girl tightened her grip on the pistol. In the silence that followed, before the next assault began, she whispered something not even the machines could hear. I will not go back. The warlord's army was coming, and this time they would not stop at the outer doors. The final storm was forming in the dark, and when it broke, there would be no place to run. The station was breaking apart. Metal screamed as another impact tore through its outer ring, sending fragments spinning into the dark void. Alarms howled and flickered before dying, leaving only the sound of distant gunfire and the heavy thud of boots moving closer. Elias Ward stood in the central hub, rifle pressed against his shoulder, eyes fixed on the narrow corridor ahead where the last barricades had been set. Behind him, the girl adjusted the cloak that now hung in tatters, her pale skin streaked with dust and the faint glow of the nanites tracing new lines across her arms and neck. Her breathing was steady, but her gaze carried something new, resolve, sharp and unshakable. Outside, the warlord's flagship blocked the stars, its claws dug deep into the station's spine. The ultimatum echoed once more across every surviving channel: surrender her, and your deaths will be quick. But there was no answer. The Marines had stopped sending replies. They were done talking. The first breach came with a roar of molten steel. Mercenaries poured in, their weapons cutting through the smoke, their armor reflecting the pale emergency lights. The Terran Marines met them with fire, their rifles spitting arcs that turned the corridor into a storm of light and ash. The air filled with the taste of scorched metal. One Marine fell, another dragged him back, blood staining the deck. Elias kept firing, his voice steady, giving orders like a man who knew every second bought them one more breath. The girl moved between the fallen crates, her pistol ready but untouched. She could feel the hum in her veins now, stronger, louder. The nanites were no longer just repairing her. They were speaking to her in pulses and heat, opening doors she did not know existed. A panel beside her flickered, broken for years, and then, without her touching it, the circuits lit. The corridor sealed itself behind them, locking two enemies out in the void. She stared at her own hands. The glow was spreading. They're coming from the upper decks, a Marine shouted, his voice breaking through the haze. Elias glanced at the girl. He saw the glow too. Can you override the upper access? He asked, not like an order, like a gamble. I think, yes, she whispered. She stepped to the nearest console, fingers hovering above the keys but never pressing them. The metal vibrated faintly under her presence, lights blooming to life in a soft wave. Doors slammed shut across the upper decks. Pressure locks engaged. Somewhere above, an explosion followed by silence. The mercenaries trapped there would not be coming down. The warlord's voice turned sharper, angrier. She is the key. That is why you fight. You cannot hide what she is becoming. The girl turned toward the shattered viewport, the warlord's ship a black shadow in the cold light of the distant sun. I will not belong to him, she said softly, almost to herself. Then the final assault began. The flagship unleashed its full strike team, dozens of armored soldiers, drones, and machines built to tear metal apart. The walls shook, the ceiling cracked, and the Marines were pushed back room by room. Explosions turned corridors into clouds of dust and debris. Elias fired until his rifle overheated, then switched to his sidearm, his armor scorched and cracked. One by one, the charges they had planted went off, ripping sections of the station into drifting fragments. But it was not enough. The girl stepped forward. "If I go to him," she said, "you all die anyway." Elias shook his head. "You're not going to him. Not while I'm still standing." "There's another way," she said. Her voice was calm. Her eyes were brighter than the fires around them. "He wants the nanites, not the girl I was. But the nanites want something else. They want to live. They can break his ship if I let them." Elias stared at her. "You won't survive that." She smiled, faint and tired. "I was never meant to survive. You gave me more time than I had." Before he could stop her, she walked toward the reactor core. The surviving Marines shouted after her, but she was already opening the hatch. Energy surged through the floor like a living thing, crawling up her arms, her throat, her face. The glow turned white. The warlord's voice came again, desperate now. "Stop her! Stop her now!" It was too late. The girl reached the heart of the station and let the nanites spread. They poured out of her like a silver storm, flooding the circuits, leaping through the airlocks, racing along the docking clamps straight into the warlord's flagship. Lights flickered across its hull. Engines sputtered. Weapons went silent. The massive ship twisted as its systems turned against themselves. Drones froze midair, then shattered as the nanites devoured them from within. The Marines watched in silence as the black shadow cracked apart, breaking into burning fragments that fell into the asteroid belt like a dying storm. The station groaned but held. Elias forced the hatch open and rushed inside. The reactor hummed steady again, the glow fading. The girl lay on the floor, pale, her chest rising slow and weak. She looked up at him with tired eyes. "I rewrote my fate," she whispered. "Now write yours." He knelt beside her, the weight of the war gone quiet for the first time. Outside, the warlord's fleet was retreating, crippled and broken. The girl had given them a chance, not by being a weapon, but by choosing what to become. "Rest now," Elias said softly. "You're going home." For the first time, she smiled, small, almost lost in the cold light, but real. The Terran medic had saved a dying girl. In return, she had saved them all.